And if I told you once, I ain't gonna tell you twice. Salute all my real ones. Yeah, look, bro. We got how Mexican drug cartels make billions. The war on drugs. Yo, I know a lot of people joke about El Chapo, his wife, his family. Yo, listen, I don't want no problems. You know what I'm saying? Those Mexican cartels is real. Don't want no smoke, so I'm gonna watch this video respectfully. Before we get into that, like button, subscribe button, notification bell, press those. Let's go.
When talking about the war on drugs in Mexico, the word cartel gets thrown around a lot.
Around the cartels. To keep the cartels.
To fight the cartels.
Sinaloa, Juarez, Los Zetas, La Familia, the list of names goes on and on. But who are these organizations that have turned Mexican cities into 7 of the top 10 deadliest in the world? How did Mexico get to a point where paramilitary drug trafficking networks bring in billions of dollars in revenue, murder tens of thousands of people a year, and often operate as semi-autonomous states within the country? In this episode, we're taking apart who the cartels are and how they went from working together to killing each other. In the late 1970s,
right, yo, this even though it's not the same, like this reminds me of Cocaine Cowboys. If y'all never seen Cocaine Cowboys, you know what I'm saying, look that up, especially the first one. I think it's the first one or the second one. There's 2 of them. I think there might be 3, but the first 2 is fire. But one of them, like, was talking about Griselda Blanco. Not to be confused with Benny Conway and West Side. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it was talking about Griselda Blanco's empire. You know what I'm saying? She was called the Black Widow. Like, yo, she was getting it in Florida. Like, on some just vengeful, malicious, like, heartless, just out there just getting people bodied left and right. So if stuff like this is what you like to watch, Cocaine Cowboys, y'all gotta watch that. Word.
Cocaine use exploded across America. The main smuggling route was straight from the jungles of Colombia into Florida, as made famous by movies like Scarface and Blow. To disrupt this traffic, in 1982, Ronald Reagan set up the South Florida Task Force, under the command of then Vice President George Bush. But for a guy who claimed to love capitalism, when it came to the drug trade, Reagan didn't seem to understand much about how business actually works. Instead of giving up their billion-dollar industry because a few shipments had been busted in the Caribbean, the Colombian cocaine producers decided to make use of Mexico's 2,000-mile land border with the US.
This is like the narco superhighway. There's actually 300 different smuggling trails right through here. There's no big wall or anything. You can just walk off into the desert with your pack full of cocaine.
There were 2 primary Mexican operators the Colombians went to. The first was Juan Garcia Abrego in Tamaulipas, head of a gang of smugglers whose roots stretched all the way back to alcohol prohibition. They switched over to the drugs trade and the Gulf Cartel was born. The other was Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Gallardo became known as El Jefe del Jefes, or the boss of bosses, creating probably the single most powerful organized crime group in Mexican history, the Guadalajara Cartel. One key issue to remember here is that at this point, none of these organizations actually called themselves cartels.
So you have these networks of drug traffickers across Mexico, and for many decades they're not called cartels, they're simply groups of criminals with buying and selling and forming different alliances and partnerships. So there's a bit of discussion even exactly who coined that phrase. Was it actually the Medellin traffickers themselves saying we're a cartel? Or was it actually the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, inventing the word cartel as a way to classify these groups? Now, whether or not it was the DEA who first coined this phrase, it was very useful to the DEA because if you look at the laws, the conspiracy to traffic drugs laws, the racketeering laws, you need to have an organization. So there's also an incentive there for the DEA in their communications to say, these are a cartel, it's the Guadalajara cartel, not just the Guadalajara marijuana traffickers.
You know what's crazy is that like when I be pulling up at the deli sometimes, this is back like a year or two ago before the pandemic. There used to be like these Mexican dudes behind the counter that used to like whip up the sandwiches and stuff. And you know, like while they making your joint, like you could make small talk or whatever. And I used to talk to them and they used to tell me like crazy stories that, you know what I'm saying, they used to see people hung off, like, you know, when you driving down the highway and you see the signs, those big green signs that tell you where to go, like people used to be hung off those, like on some wild shit. He was like, yo, like I've seen like, you know, people hung off street lamps and bodies and garbages. So it's like, yo, it's real, man. Like people think Mexico is Mexico is no joke. Like that's why you gotta respect, like, I'm not saying I condone the violence or none of that. I'm just saying, like, yo, what's going on down there is to be, like, you can't talk about that lightly. You know what I'm saying? Or disrespect, you know, what's going on down there. And hopefully, like, the people that are civilians that, you know, aren't trying to live their life that way could find a way to escape. You know what I'm saying? And that just goes into the whole politics of people seeking asylum and trying to leave their countries from all the violence they experience day to day and trying to come to America. So, like, you know, a lot of times, like, people try to say, oh, yo, it's a bunch of criminals, blah, blah, blah. But literally, it's like, yo, if you living like that and if you living in the middle of one of those cities and you're just a regular person trying to raise a family, you don't do no illegal shit, you know what I'm saying? And you see all the craziness going around, that's happening all around you, you know what I'm saying? And innocent people are dying. Like, you can understand why people is trying to leave that. You know what I'm saying? There's so many people in the world that just want to work hard, make a living, and make it better for their kids and improve their family tree. And you can't blame people for trying to escape that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I see it. I could be wrong, but...
What is clear is that these early Mexican groups, the Guadalajara and Gulf cartels, amassed almost unimaginable wealth and power, transporting thousands of tons of cocaine, heroin, and cannabis into the booming US market. But then they overplayed their hand. In 1985, corrupt officials working for the Guadalajara cartel kidnapped DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in broad daylight on the streets of Guadalajara before torturing and murdering him. The gruesome murder of a highly decorated DEA agent was too much, even for the increasingly powerful Mexican traffickers to get away with. Key members of the Guadalajara cartel were arrested, but by this point, the organization had become too big for one man to run. From prison, Felix Gallardo organized a now legendary gangster summit in Acapulco, of which the Guadalajara empire was divided into separate, smaller cartels. The Juarez cartel, the Tijuana cartel, and the Sinaloa cartel, commanded by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The idea was that each of these groups would control their territory, or plaza, and work together to ensure the drugs kept flowing smoothly. In fact, somewhat predictably, what actually happened is that they immediately started fighting each other in a drug war that continues to this day.
So as the cartels develop, they have very different structures and ways of doing business and hierarchy. You have some like the Sinaloa cartel, which are more like loose affiliations of businessmen. On the other side, you have much more hierarchical pyramidal organizations like the Zetas or the Knights Templar, with more clear ranks and command structures going down.
By the mid-90s, the leader of the Gulf cartel, Ociel Cardenas, recruited a group of Mexican special forces who defected and joined him as the armed wing of the Gulf cartel.
So when the Gulf cartel recruits the former special forces military and they become the Zetas, they really change the game of how violence plays out in Mexico. It's full-on paramilitary units, people in bulletproof jackets, metal helmets, radios, AK-47s. And then once the Zetas do that, everyone has to copy them, so it becomes paramilitarized, organized crime in Mexico.
In 2003, Osiel Cardenas, the head of the Gulf Cartel, was arrested. Without him in charge, power within the organization gradually shifted to the Zetas themselves. And in 2010, they broke away to form their own.
Yo, just look at that picture, bro. That's a wild picture. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you would, if you didn't have no context, you just saw that picture, you think, all right, cool, this is the military. But like, this dead ass is like a cartel. Like, they on some militant, you know what I'm saying? We getting money, is get down and lay down. Like, you know what I'm saying? Ain't nothing gonna get in our way from getting this bread. Word, like, so you could see like how it's difficult for the Mexican government, which ain't like the American one, for them to be able to stop that. Word. And for the people living day to day, like, yo, you know what I'm saying? Imagine seeing stuff like that, and you know that, you know what I'm saying, that they don't represent the government. These just some dudes out here trying to get their bread. So if you're a regular person, like, what choice you got? You got to dip off unless you're going to try to fight them, which is a suicide mission. It's crazy.
Cartel, causing a massive spike in violence throughout Tamaulipas, which spread through the whole east coast of Mexico.
So you have this rising tension between the Zetas and the Gulf Cartel masters. And eventually in 2010, you have the Zetas and the Gulf Cartel breaking out into open warfare. The Zetas separating, becoming their own cartel. And this unleashes some of the worst violence in all of Mexico's cartel conflict. These crazy battles happening along roads with Zetas against Gulf Cartel operatives, and the Zetas unleashing horrific violence, dragging people out of cars, massacring migrants, carrying out a series of some of the worst atrocities that Mexico will see.
When we look at the cartel map of Mexico over time, what we see is essentially a process of fragmentation. Every time the government takes out one cartel, it subdivides into smaller cartels who then fight each other, becoming even more violent as they go on. We can see this play out again and again. The more the government fights, the faster the process accelerates. In Michoacán, after the arrest of its leader, La Familia Michoacana split into Guerreros Unidos, Los Viagras, and most significantly, the Knights Templar, run by Nazario Mourinho Gonzalez, or El Más Loco, literally the craziest one. Right. Gonzalez ran his cartel like a pseudo-religious cult, forcing his soldiers to carry around a book of his religious teachings.
Tenemos el libro de El Más Loco, Nazario Moreno González, ahí está su nombre. Es el mismo personaje según. Reunía a sus subordinados y los invitaba a su culto. Repartía vino, estabas comprometido con los caballeros templarios y firmabas con sangre.
In Jalisco, the boss of the Milenio cartel was arrested in 2009. The group then split into La Resistencia, and crucially, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, who took after the Zetas in adopting a ruthless paramilitary style, and have since started an all-out war with the Sinaloa cartel.
Simplemente soy un comandante aquí en la región de Michoacán, comandante aquí del cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación. Nosotros producimos, exportamos y vendemos droga. Eso es de lo que papá de nosotros hace el dinero. Esa es la empresa de nosotros.
The Zetas themselves splintered into the so-called old-school Zetas and the Cartel del Noreste. While El Chapo was finally locked up in a US maximum security prison in 2019, the Sinaloa Federation has lost none of its power. When the Mexican army tried to arrest El Chapo's son later that year, hundreds of heavily armed cartel gunmen poured into the streets.
Oh yeah, and I think I heard this story that they went and captured El Chapo's son. Then they ran up in the street, started wilding, spraying shit up, and the Mexican government had no choice but to like release this dude in order to stop the violence. Like, crazy. That's crazy.
And didn't stop shooting until the government backed down and released him.
the government is stuck with this impossible choice. If you leave these kingpins, you're allowing impunity and allowing them to become more powerful. If you take them down, you're seeing the cartels fragment and seeing more violence happen.
The shifting and changing map of Mexican cartel power has been accompanied by grotesque violence.
Notice the Juarez one, the Juarez and the Gulf of Mexico one, they overlap into America, and the Tijuana one. So
2007, after the first year of Calderon's war on drugs, the murder rate was 8,122. By 2020, it had rocketed to over 34,000. After all this bloodshed, have the drugs stopped flowing over the border? No. More Americans are getting high on drugs that have passed through Mexico than ever before.
So now this is the philosophical question. Is it the Americans' people's fault that because of everything that's going on with Mexico, or is it the Mexican government's fault, right? Because if there's no demand, then there's no need for supply. But at the same time, it's like, all right, cool. If there was no supply, what would happen to the demand? So it's like, is it our fault as a country because people want to be users, or is it the government's fault in Mexico for not being able to stop those dudes? And at the end of the day, it's like, yo, well, there's supply, there's demand. So they gonna try to, you know what I'm saying, get their money because they making billions. You know what I'm saying? They're more like I think some of the government agencies talked about it here, that the cartels are more well funded than the agencies here. So, you know what I'm saying? Like it's crazy, bro. Like that, you know what I'm saying? And I know people talk like, yo, you should just send the army down there. Like, nah, champ, it's not that easy, bro. Like, those dudes are well armed. Some of them are well trained. Like, I don't know. I don't got the answers. That's why I'm not a politician. I just know that it's real out there, bro. It's real out there.
In fact, what we see after tracing all this back over 100 years is that pretty much every time the US and Mexican governments have tried to stamp out the drug trade, it's made the situation more violent, and the Mexican people have paid the price.
We'd like to congratulate drugs for winning the war on drugs.
Nah, that's crazy. But yeah, man, I don't know. Yeah, there's so many nuances to the story and everything that's going on over there. Like, I know the media likes to say, oh, you know, we got to build walls, blah, 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 blah. But y'all got to think about, like, yo, why is it that people are trying to leave their countries? Like, nobody's going to try to dip off from their home just because they want to. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you got to think about what's causing them to want to leave. And, you know what I'm saying? I just think about all the kids and, you know what I'm saying, 20,000 kids coming to the border. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fact that people would say, yo, I'm sending my 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old child by themselves on this dangerous journey through Mexico to make it to the American border, to try to make it into America by themselves, and I'm not joining them. You just got to think like, yo, what's causing people to want to do that? You know what I'm saying? And it's not just because they want to let their kids go. It got to really be that bad wherever they at. And that's not just Mexico. That's going down to some of the other Latin American countries. So I know it's crazy, bro. I know it's crazy. So sometimes you just got to thank, you know what I'm saying, count your blessings. Thank God for every day that you got a breath, you know what I'm saying, keep it pushing. Word. But and not look down on anybody else for why they trying to seek asylum or leave wherever they leaving from. But you know, that's just my piece. I ain't here to preach. I'm just saying that's what I believe. My name is Rain. Catch you on the flip side. RCP salute. Dab on them.